Part 1. The House That Watches You Rewind. I work for a company that doesn't exist on paper. We don't have a website, no HR department, no mission statement, just a plain envelope slipped under your door at exactly 3:33 a.m. Inside, a short note. We saw how you watched it. You paused it, rewound it. You didn't look away. We think you'd be perfect. That was 3 weeks ago. Now I work for the tape eaters. My first job was simple: retrieve a VHS tape from an abandoned house outside Pittsfield, Massachusetts. I was told not to wear anything with logos, no bright colors, no devices that transmit, only analog tools. Paper maps, flashlights with no digital display. Even the batteries were regulated. Digital stuff gets hungry, my handler said, and the tapes feed on signal. That was the first red flag. The second was the fact that I was partnered with someone who refused to say their name. They just told me, "Call me Ribbon," like the things on old cassette reels. The house was one of those impossible places, like it had been carved out of a different decade and dropped into the present. Shingles hanging like dead skin, the windows all boarded, but the boards were nailed from the inside, and above the front door was a barely legible carving in the wood. "Please rewind yourself." Ribbon handed me a crowbar and said, "In and out, no talking, no looking at reflections." Why? If you talk, it records. If you look, it remembers. Inside, the house was silent, but not empty. The walls were moving. Not visibly, but you could feel it, like being inside a lung that was slowly exhaling. The air was thick and sour like mold and melted plastic. Ribbon pulled out a Polaroid camera, only analog, only film. Snap anything that moves. I turned on my flashlight. The beam cut across a room lined with televisions, dozens of them, all unplugged, but one was on, static hissing quietly, and in the middle of the static, a frame, just one, paused, of a man sitting in a bathtub, smiling up at the camera, eyes gouged out. Ribbon leaned close. "That's Greeley, last agent sent in here." "Is he alive?" Ribbon didn't answer. Instead, they reached down and opened the VCR. Inside, no tape, just a piece of flesh shaped like a tongue. We moved deeper into the house. The layout didn't make sense. Rooms were looping. A hallway led back into itself. The kitchen had a second fridge that opened to stairs. Ribbon said, "The tape's here. I can feel it." "What do you mean, feel it?" "It's inside someone." We found the body in the basement, tied to a recliner, mouth stretched on with film reels. His chest had been cut open, and inside his rib cage, where organs should have been, was a spool, a reel, spinning slowly. The tape was being recorded from the inside out. "Help me," the man rasped, but Ribbon held up a hand. "Don't speak, don't engage. It's not him anymore. He's buffering." Then the lights flickered. The TVs upstairs turned on all at once, their sound leaking through the vents like whispering in reverse. Ribbon ripped the tape from the man's chest. He didn't scream. He just smiled. And in that smile, I saw the same thing I'd seen on the paused frame. The bathtub, the grin, the missing eyes. Ribbon stuffed the tape into a lead-lined box and whispered, "We got what we came for. Now run." We didn't go out the same way we came in, because that door didn't exist anymore. The house had changed while we were inside. Corridors now stretched for miles. Doors led to staircases that folded in on themselves. I swear we passed a hallway full of identical bedrooms, each one with a different version of me sleeping in the bed. Ribbon whispered, "Don't look, don't look, don't look." But I did. I looked, and one of the other Mez, opened his eyes and mouthed something. "You've seen the tape already." We made it out. As the house collapsed behind us, not like a building falling down, but like a video being rewound too fast, all the frames melting back into each other. Ribbon put the box in the trunk, lit a cigarette, looked at me and said, "You passed the test. You're not just a runner now, you're an eater." 2 weeks later, I've eaten 3 tapes since. We don't watch them, we ingest them. They look like standard VHS reels, but the magnetic strip is biological. Almost like it's grown, not made. The first time I tried to swallow one, it moved on its own, wrapped around my throat, pulsed like a heartbeat. Ribbon told me, "Every tape is a forgotten truth, a discarded god. You don't get to carry it, you have to become it." And I did, and I saw things. I saw the first time someone recorded a soul. It wasn't with a camera, it was with a mirror. A long time ago, before film, before language, there were watchers. Things that fed on memory. They made devices to hold them. Reels, shells, plastic vessels. But the memories were too strong, too cursed, so they had to be fed to people, to us. We became the tape eaters. We don't preserve the past, we lock it away in flesh. And now, there's a new tape, unlike anything we've seen before. It's not analog, it's alive. It pulses in the vault, it sings in magnetic tones, it shows up in our dreams. No one knows where it came from. Ribbon says it may be the final tape. The one recorded before memory itself existed. The one that can't be digested. Only broadcast. And tonight, I'm the one who has to eat it. Episode 2, Teeth in the Signal. You hear it too, right? Even when the TV's off, the static's whispering again. When I first joined the tape eaters, they told me some tapes didn't want to be found. Others, they wanted you to watch them. This one was the second kind. It started with a phone call, a landline, buzzing in the middle of the night. Not mine, Ribbon's. She kept it in a lead line drawer wrapped in copper mesh. Said it was only for emergency contact from the vault. That night, it rang. She didn't answer it. She just stared at it, shaking. When I asked what was wrong, she whispered, "That phone's been dead for 20 years. The vault sent us out the next day. A tape had been discovered inside the remains of a telephone pole, inside the wood. A work crew had been cutting it down near a forgotten stretch of highway, and their saw hit something strange. Not metal, not wires. Something magnetic, organic. They pulled it out with gloves. It looked like a bundle of VHS tape wrapped in enamel, splintered glass, and something that looked bone. The guy who touched it first, he chewed off his own fingers before the paramedics arrived. Said they tasted like ringing. We drove out in the black van. No plates, radio sealed, windowless. I noticed Ribbon was wearing headphones the entire trip, but not plugged into anything. I asked why. She just said, "If you hear the ring twice, it finds your name." I didn't ask again. The telephone pole was still there, split open like a broken rib. Inside the trunk of wood, a crusted-over cavity, burned, wet, and hissing, like it had been smoking from the inside out for years. The tape wasn't there anymore, but the buzzing was, like a distant dial tone coming from underground. We followed the sound. There was a shed behind the old service station, covered in kudzu and nearly swallowed by time. Inside was a trapdoor, and below it, a tunnel made of phone cords, thousands of them, black and red, plastic cracked with age, crawling down into the earth like veins. The walls pulsed with signal, not electricity, not heat, something older than both. We followed the signal. The tunnel narrowed, then opened into what looked like an old switchboard station, buried deep underground. A single chair, rotting desk, dozens of lines plugged into nothing. In the chair sat a corpse, head twisted backward, eyes replaced with melted plastic dials, mouth full of magnetic tape. Ribbon moved fast. She pulled gloves on, opened her field kit, and carefully removed the reel from the body's mouth. She whispered, "Don't look into its eyes." Too late. The dials turned, and the thing in the chair inhaled. It didn't breathe air, it breathed signal. And when it exhaled, the walls buzzed louder like 100,000 phone calls overlapping. Then it spoke. Call connected. First memory, I held her hand and said, "Don't go." Second memory, I held her hand and said, "Don't go." Third memory, I never had hands. Then it screamed in dial tones and the whole station went dark. Ribbon shoved the tape into the lead case. She grabbed my arm and said, "We run, now." We barely made it out. As we climbed the tunnel, the cords began to tighten, wrapping around our legs, arms, throat. I heard voices in them. Hundreds, thousands, all calling someone, and all hearing the same voice on the other end. Mine. Back at the vault, they sealed the tape in a quarantine chamber. Said it was infected with resonance, a term I hadn't heard before. Apparently, some tapes are recorded from inside other people's minds, not with cameras, not with film, but by imprinting trauma onto signal. And this one, it had been recorded through a dying phone call. They called it the 333 replay. Over the next few days, something strange started happening. I kept hearing phones ring, landlines. But I don't have a landline, neither does Ribbon. The vault doesn't even allow them. Worse, when I didn't answer, I'd find messages on my walls, in the condensation on mirrors, in the voice of my TV static. "You're not listening. Pick up, she's trying to say goodbye." Then one night, I did pick up. There was no sound at first, just a long, wet breath. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 10 years. My sister. "Why didn't you stay on the line?" I collapsed. Because my sister died in 2013, slipped on a rainy road. The last thing I remember is the call dropping, a voicemail I never got to hear. Until now. The vault tried to erase it, said the tape had caused signal bleed. That memories were escaping their original hosts, crossing time, digging up grief, infecting the living. Ribbons started bleeding from her ears. She said something was whispering to her. The dialer, the one who records what no one says out loud. The one who eats silence. They burned the tape. They always do, but not all of it. 1 inch remained, and even in that inch you could still hear ringing. And every night since then, just before I sleep, I hear my sister's voice whispering from the wall, "Please don't rewind me again. It hurts." Reality starts skipping, and the man who tried to rewrite himself is coming undone. Episode 3, The Man Who Edited Himself. He found a way to cut out the pain, but when you remove the memory, something else takes its place. They said he was one of the first, a pioneer, one of the original tape eaters before they even had a name for it. Back when they didn't use gloves or vaults or quarantine, they just consumed memories raw. His name used to be Jonah Hale, but now he just calls himself version 7. We were sent to find him after a string of disturbances, missing persons, broken time loops, and the reappearance of corrupted echoes, copies of people who shouldn't be alive anymore. All of them said the same thing before vanishing. I remember differently now. We tracked version 7 to an abandoned video rental store in New Mexico. The sign outside read, "Be kind, rewind yourself." Inside was a maze of old TVs stacked on top of each other, all playing different versions of the same memory. A man walking down a hallway toward a door. Each time he walked a little differently. In some, he was limping. In others, he was smiling. In a few, he was on fire. The door never opened. We found him in the back room, surrounded by mirrors, but not reflecting anything. Each mirror played a looped memory, each one a cut, an edit, a version. He had no face left, just strips of magnetic tape draped over a skull. His fingers were razors made from spliced reels. His body bled static. When he spoke, it was layered, multiple voices at once. I removed the unnecessary. I shaved down the moments that hurt. I was a child. I was a monster. I was a good man. All true, all false. I am, he called it self-editing, a technique he'd pioneered using a prototype, the memory blade. A reel-to-reel player modified with a surgical dial. It let him slice through traumatic moments, scrub them from his personal timeline. But the problem with cutting memory is that space doesn't stay empty. Something always fills in the blank. Ribbon warned me not to get too close. But I couldn't help it. The screens were hypnotic. Endless versions of myself. In one, I was a doctor. In another, I was screaming in a straitjacket. In another, I was a child again, crying at a funeral I don't remember attending. The door behind me clicked shut. Version 7 stood over me and whispered, "What would you remove? What scar would you erase? And what thing would you let in to take its place?" He lunged. I fought back. The memory blade sliced across my shoulder, but instead of pain, I felt forgetting. For a moment, I didn't know who I was, didn't know where I was. My own name felt like static in my mouth. Ribbon pulled me back, shoved a preservation tape into my mouth and hit play. It restored just enough. I remembered how to scream. We ran. But the store began replaying itself. Hallways looped, aisles repeated, shelves reset. We were being scrubbed, frame by frame. We broke into the projection room and found a wall covered in Post-it notes, all of them written by version 7. Each note had a date, a moment, a cut. 4/16/01, removed guilt, replaced with cold. 8/09/06, removed face, no longer recognizable to pain. 2/03/14, removed death of brother, left blank, something else crawled in. The final note was smeared with blood. Today, remove self, final cut, nothing left. We found him in front of the mirror again. But this time, he wasn't watching a loop. He was recording one. He looked at me, tape unraveling from his mouth. I thought if I cut enough, I'd find the version of me that could survive. But every version still hurts. Every edit is just a new shape of the same scream. Then the mirrors imploded, turning to fog, and he was gone. We returned to the vault with the memory blade sealed in 6 containment layers. I was told to rest. But when I went home that night, something was missing. I couldn't remember what my mother's face looked like. and in her place there's a blurry figure now, standing in every photo, watching me from behind the glass. Ribbon told me it's the price of touching corrupted timelines. Memory isn't infinite, it's fungible. Break one thread and something else threads itself in. Sometimes people, sometimes monsters, sometimes both. I asked the vault one question before I left the next day. How many other tape eaters have tried to edit themselves? They just showed me a number on a monitor, 94, and then a second number. 1. The first number was the failed attempts. The second, the one who succeeded. He has no memories left, no self, no face. They say he walks the walls of the vault at night, and if you listen closely, you can hear him muttering in a dozen voices. What did I used to be? What did I forget to forget?